Alice K. Shattuck, 1995.
What about 1990 and 5?
1990 and 5. You had a friend of mine. My friend. I was hanging out with my friend Mike G. You know Mike. He's our friend. He listens. And 1990 and 5. Mike worked with a lady named Anne. Anne Heimlicher was her name.
Okay.
Still is her name, I think. And she was a concierge at the Parker House where Mike worked, 227-8600. I worked at the Marriott Hotel, 536-5000, in Cambridge. So Anne she owned a company, I think she still does, called Boston Spotlight. And what they would do, and this is hugely important, what Boston Spotlight would do is promote restaurants and bars and things that were brand new, and some tourists, like the trolley tour people or whatever. And she would organize and have all the concierges come to a party that she'd tell the people to throw. So the restaurant would close or give us a function room, whatever it was. And we'd all the concierges, I wasn't even a concierge this time. I was a valet, bellman, doorman. But Anne wanted young faces there, and so me and Mike were young faces there. You know, he was 19 or whatever, I was 22. So 95, I had a good-looking year. This is the apex of my looks. This is the picture that my mother used to keep framed even in subsequent years because she was ashamed of my looks in subsequent years. But that year I was handsome, so she kept this. Had a good-looking year in 95 because I lost some weight because I ran so hard being a valet. So, anyway. So, Anne has all these parties at all these great places, and Mike and I are young kids, and we're going to the best places in Boston. And Anne is a sweetheart and so fun and so great. And us concierges used to go, me and Mike and Anne, and whatever, go to these parties. And it was good for the places because they got exposure. But what's the thing that if you're a restaurant, you want to do for a concierge, or at least was then?
You want to grease the concierges so they send people to
you. You want to grease them, you want to wine and dine them. So they would ply us with booze, which didn't take much pressure for Mike and I. We were all fine with that. And so we were just enjoying ourselves to no end. To no end. Had a great time. Hang on one second. I just have to actually.
What?
Hang on.
I can't believe about you that you would underage drink, Thomas.
I was of age. So anyway, Anne, so we would go to these great parties, get beautiful gift bags. They would totally take care of you. Obviously, the places run by Italians would really take care of you. And it was incredible. It was incredible. It was just a great time and a great. So, 22 years old or whatever it was, spending every night of the week at another free event with great food, great wine, beautiful women everywhere. Of course, I had the food and wine. The women were largely that was not so automatic, but it was just a great time to be alive. And you're that age. You're 21 years old. I didn't care. I had a job. I was a valet in the morning. I would essentially wake up after a few hours of sleep and just groggy and go in there and sleep on the T and go in and do my valet parking, etc. But one of the greatest parties we ever had was 1995 at Sonsie. Do you know Sonsie? Sonsie in Boston. It's at the end of Newbury Street. The Mass Ave end of Newbury Street. And it was the hottest place in the world in 1995. And Mike and I and Anna, we got these great gift bags. It was a blast. Got to feel like a celebrity. We got these Lions Club cards. Do you know what those are?
Nope.
So I think it was Tommy Lyons, who I later met at those breakfasts I used to go to, who was a mover and shaker. He ran a bunch of clubs, etc. If you had his card, that would get you VIP treatment anywhere. If you had a Lions Club card in the mid-90s, you were rock and roll. You'd show your card, and front of the line, drinks taken care of. It was the thing. So we were at this party in 1995 at Sonsie, which was the swankiest, coolest place. They had incredible gift bags with great hats and all sorts of different things and gift certificates. Anne knew what she was doing. She still does. And so they'd get all of the great spas, etc., to kick in stuff to the gift bags. It was living. Considering Mike and I essentially made minimum wage,
Right.
we were living like rich people. And it was so fun and just great. And you go to the original, the party, and then go to some other party. And really, I spent my retirement in my 20s. Thanks to Anne, mostly, who would say, I've got another party coming, another party coming, another party coming, another party coming. And it was just wonderful. Shortly after that, I lived in Boston. So I'm just stumbling around, just I wasn't necessarily using a whole lot of brain power at the time, but it was just the greatest thing in the world. And I remember that Sonsie going there and getting that card. It was so wonderful, so wonderful. 1995. Tonight, as we speak, Mike is texting me from Sonsie at one of Anne's parties right now. 27 years later. Is this going in and out every time I hit the
every time you hit the table, yes.
And it's just incredible, just how like in a flash life changes. But the magic of being young, I have made mostly all mistakes in my whole life. Obviously, stumbling into you was a fluke, but my goodness, did we have a fun time in our 20s. Let it not be said, and I used to say this to another friend of mine, John, who may have been at that party too, that I thought the way to win life is to laugh the most, and we were laughing for just forever. It was a fun time, and so Anne and my Sonsie friends, I hope things are. I hope you're having a good time. So fun, so fun.
Nothing's changed at Sonsie and with Anne.
No, Anne still got the company. It's a great company. It's a great idea. It's such a great idea. And being a concierge, I wasn't one then, but 2 years later, I did become one. And I worked with Anne at the Parker House. And working at a hotel, it's like working at a restaurant. It's both terrible. For me, it was terrible because I wasn't doing anything to my potential. I wasn't being paid for my own creativity because I was afraid to try to be creative. Whatever. I was just a classic underachiever, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you meet some great people there and some brilliant people there. You've been in retail.
Yeah.
Like, don't count. I just told you. I was just talking to you about that Boston breakfast with all the millionaires that I used to have to go to every week, which sucked.
You'd rather work at a hotel than go to the Boston breakfast?
Yep. The intelligence of the people working at that hotel are... I'll mention Dan McKenna again. Dan McKenna has said more brilliant things that I've heard from any other person in that room full of geniuses. I mentioned this today because somebody called and was talking about how, why all these senators love to run for re-election. Why do they want to be a senator? Like Senator Richard Blumenthal, who's a millionaire or billionaire, whatever. And they're saying, why does he want to be a senator? Because if you're a senator, you go to a room like these breakfasts that I used to belong to, and all these movers and shakers kiss your ass. And also, the movers and shakers, by and large, are stupid. I used to listen to the questions they'd ask and say, really? What are you doing? I used to tell my boss, Joe Shaka, at the Herald after these breakfasts that I was made to go to. I would say, Joe, they're so effing stupid, these people. But everybody in that room is worth at least $30 million or more, except for one guy. Tom Shattuck. And these people are just absolutely filleting these politicians and things. I'm like, oh my God, really? How can this be happening? How can I be so wealth adjacent in being beat by these people? But yeah, and so that's what's going on. I miss Boston. I certainly miss Boston in that part of my life. I can't imagine now. It's odd to me to think of it. When you have kids. I mean, if we had no kids, we could still kind of be living that life. But if you have kids, you're hit by a bus, and that's traveling 150 miles per hour, that carries you down the highway, and so now for me it's and just kind of destroys you, frays you, and so you can't.
Yeah, really sell it, Tom. Jeez.
Well, I was thinking about that actually.
I like having kids.
So I was thinking about this, Alice. I'm glad you mentioned that because I want to move topics. I'll use this to
This is a segue.
So we're all pro Jane and Mike. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you and I and I've told them, at least Jane, your sister,
Yep.
I greenlight her to marry him.
Okay.
I think we agree that he's a fun guy with a good attitude.
Yes.
He's like just a good guy.
Yes.
He's the kind of guy that, talk about quintessential guy you want to have a beer with. No, doesn't, if he's a psychotic, I'm not getting it. I'm not picking it up. Seems like a great guy. And, they've been on together. And just fun. And somebody who's such a positive force for Jane.
Mm-hmm.
So, because she's busting her ass. She's got an important job. She's got her podcast. She's got 1,000 things going on. And you don't need somebody who's a net minus. She doesn't. You can't put her in a position where she's got to now tend to a needy boyfriend. He's a force for positivity, which is great. Which is what I have with you. I've got a net positive.
Which one of us is the net positive?
Well, right. For me, you're a net positive. For you, I'm a net negative. But you've made your decisions. It's so. That's my point exactly. So here's my point.
But I got kids out of the deal, and they're
Right.
a net positive.
Well, here's my point.
Mm-hmm.
Is that if we're trying to get Jane to get married,
Yep.
so that our kids have more cousins, right now they just got one cousin,
Yeah.
I think we're modeling bad behavior. I think she's looking at our situation and saying, because we're not glamorous, although we're getting a fairly glamorous car, supposedly in the
It's
mail
not-
in the mail soon.
It's not.
Now that the burnt orange minivan is no more, it's been
not
sucked
really
away.
that glamorous a car.
Well, so I don't think we sell it very well. I think we need to be better ambassadors as people who are pro-kid in marriage. Because I think we should try to manipulate them to get married soon.
Okay, I'll bear that in mind.
What do you mean, Alice? She's going to need prodding.
Okay. I'll try and look more like we're having a great time.
But
over
also,
here.
what do I do, Alice, when I want people to stay in to enjoy?
You bully them?
Bully. Yes, she needs to be bullied.
Well, isn't the ball in Mike's court now at this point?
Yeah, but I don't know. He's a millennial, whatever he is. He's at like 30 years
They're
old.
millennials, I would say.
I don't know what they do. I don't understand them as human beings. I don't know. Do they propose anymore? Is
Yeah,
that
they
something
do.
they do?
They do. Yeah.
I don't know. Does he have ink? I don't even know if he has ink.
I don't know. Why are you saying that in that tone of voice? First, I thought you meant, like, does he literally own ink?
Toner cartridges?
And I was like, why would he ask that? And then I'm like, oh, he's trying to be hip with the lingo the young people use to ask if he has a tattoo.
I don't know if
I
he
have
does.
no idea if he has a tattoo.
All right. Well,
I
let's
don't
get
know.
this going, but I think we need to model better behavior
Okay, I'll work on
to
that.
do it. 1995, Sonsie, end of Newbury Street.
Okay.
Man, the times I walked down through Boston, I really used the hell out of Boston for at least 10 years.
But there's other stuff, like when you're a parent, that I think other things become more fun than that, too.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, but it's a totally different universe.
Yeah. Like,
It's a
I don't
totally-
think people that don't go out, like, clubbing anymore when their parents aren't doing it because, like, they absolutely can't get away to go clubbing. I think, like,
Right,
other
right.
things become more entertaining to you than clubbing.
Oh, yeah. No, watching my daughter get a hit on the baseball team is a bigger high, or my son get a hit or make a good play is now a bigger high than anything there. And also when you're young, 22 years old, whatever, everything is new. So,
Well, yeah. Plus,
and you
like,
buy into it because the adults are running everything and you're the special young ones and you have, people think you're special and like you go into a club as a 21-year-old. Wow, look at this! It's really cool. There's fluorescent stuff, and there's all this loud noise, and the waitresses are dressed sexily, and it's everything. At this age, I went to a club with my friends a couple of years ago, and I'm like, I could see the particle board, and I could hear the music too high, and I could nothing's magic anymore. It's just, I see you're using blue lights in here. I get it. I get it. You're coming with a vial of something pink that is $17. It's gonna suck.
But it is interesting because I do think my generation in particular, there are a lot of millennial parents now. Obviously, when I first became a parent, there weren't quite as many millennial parents because I, had kids on the younger side, and so
Well, they were all 0 when you had them.
and then. So when I had kids,
Really? You don't
it
think
was,
that's good?
I laughed at it.
Thank you.
I laughed at it. It was great. Okay, so, I think that there weren't as many people my age, so I ended up, like, hanging around with parents that were maybe a bit older than me because they were the age that my kids were, and then now there's like a lot more millennial parents out there, and I really feel like they maybe are hanging on to the pre-kid version of themselves more than people used to. I think part of it is, I mean, I think even Gen X is like this to an extent. I mean, I certainly think Gen X doesn't look as old as their parents' generation did, like in their 40s.
I think that's by. Hold on.
Like the boomers or whatever, when they had kids and they were like in their 40s, they looked like middle-aged people. Like
right.
the parents
I think
parents on that 70s show look like kind of like
right,
old
exactly.
people.
And I think that is definitely by design. And there's a time when I can watch people my age dressing like Jason Bateman in Juno.
Mm-hmm.
When people guys my age started buying retro band T-shirts and like flannel and stuff,
Yeah.
I think I think there definitely is a.
Well, even like the haircuts and stuff, and like just the ways people look, like it doesn't. I mean, guys now look like dads, but the way a dad looks and how young they look now, even like the dads of kids our kids' age tend to be a bit older than me and maybe a tiny bit younger than you, but in that range, roughly around your age, and like they look way younger than dads looked when I was a kid.
Right.
And it's not just in my head because people seemed older when I was a kid. It's also like you look at pictures and you're like, wow, you look at like pictures of your parents and you're like, wow, they looked so old. And like, then you think back and you're like, wow, they're like my age now,
Yeah.
It's weird. But that was like already happening, I think, with Gen X and with older millennials. But now it's like people really aren't changing anything about their lives, like when they have kids, and I think, I think part of it, I think that people who have the means to do so, it's a lot easier to do that. First of all, if you have fewer kids, and second of all, if you can afford to like pay people to do stuff with your kids all the time, it affords you a lot more time to sort of like continue living the life and being the person that you were before kids. I think a lot fewer people now, again, like because of lifestyle choices, are choosing to continue to work when maybe they were doing single income households before, and that keeps you like sort of in a different universe from having kids a little bit. Like, and all these things are just contributing factors, right? But I think the culture of parenthood has really changed, and that there's much more of a sense that, like, I'm still the same person, I'm just doing this for a little while. There's like very much a vibe of like needing to be the parent who's not too parenty.
Well, that's interesting. And I wonder why that is. I think probably I think that we'll start with Gen X, is that they're more vain because a lot of Gen X people are in much better shape. For a lot of them, for the first time in their lives. I think people work out now. In in the 80s, it was like the jocks worked out. There wouldn't be any reason. Like your brother, both brothers are really strong guys. Edward, your brother, is like ripped.
Yeah.
That would be when I was a kid. You'd be like a kid who was getting into professional weightlifting would be like that. In other words, like I never went to a gym in the 80s. There was no reason.
Right, but don't you think part of that is like means too? Like, don't you think that like the boomers, once they like had careers and were parents and like owned a home and were mowing the lawn on weekend, like they didn't have the time or extra, like they wouldn't go work out. Like now parents in their 40s make time for themselves and spend the money to go work out, either by having equipment at their house. Like the idea, if you had told boomers in their 40s, in their house with their kids, right? Like, oh, why don't you buy a several $1,000 exercise bike that you can use at your house? I mean, I know exercise bikes existed, but like average married, like middle-aged people told them to buy a several $1,000 exercise bike to like have in their house and like take special exercise classes with. They would have thought you were nuts. Like People just wouldn't have spent the money on
Well,
stuff
there was
like
an
that, I
exercise
don't think.
revolution, no doubt. And the Jane Fonda workout was a huge thing. And in the 80s, Jim Fixx, the runner who died in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
And people were quitting smoking. My dad quit smoking and then was told by his doctor to start jogging, which he did for 3 days. You know, he dusted off the sneakers that he had last worn in 1967 and
Mm-hmm.
dragged me and my brother to the track to try to jog a quarter of a mile. But you're right. Generally, yeah. Generally,
Now it's considered like almost a necessity, like self-care, right?
Mhm.
Not to mention, I mean, I don't really know as much about what guys do, but like all these women who are middle-aged, who are moms, all, I mean, all, if somebody's going to tell me they don't. Everybody's getting their hair done, getting their nails done, tanning, like, I mean, Botox, tons of stuff. Like, not everybody does all of those, obviously, but like, you know, I just don't think like people used to spend as much time and money on stuff like that as they used to. Not to mention like yoga class and gym memberships and all those things. Like I don't think that was considered like a necessity of life
It is
in
interesting,
the
though.
80s. The way like suburban people now like all have gym memberships or like yoga classes or
Well-
like they all have something that they do that's
Oh,
like
no
that.
no doubt about that. And well, maybe some of that is the fact that we've gotten increasingly fat. Regardless, and
Not the people in the towns with like
Well,
the
I
Boston sports club
I understand that,
gyms.
but generally people are getting fatter.
Right.
Food is, or at least was, but it has been relatively cheap. It's not. It's you can for 77 cents you can get a pound of pasta. But what I'm saying is that maybe that creates and solidifies the class divide
Right.
where you don't want to
You
be
have the money to be in shape.
exactly, and so and you want to be a person who's one of the in shape people,
Mhm.
not one of the fat people. That's déclassé.
Well, right. It signals that you're, you're part of the right social circles if you
Right.
have a nice gym membership and you're skinny and you work out and all
What
that
I have
stuff.
found disappointing is a couple of classmates of mine
Mhm.
have posted shirtless pictures of themselves. Guys.
Do they look good?
Yeah, pretty good. But still, it's like, really, guys? Like, what are we doing here? I mean, yeah, they don't look like me. Yeah, although I could do that, I guarantee you.
But they don't look like my brother Edward either.
Right. But you know, be interesting is I come from a generation where at least a good portion of the guys would tell me the truth. Whereas if I was 21 years old and I put a shirtless picture of myself out there in this shape, I'd probably be 95% lied to.
Right.
Looking awesome, Tom. Kicking ass. Because the generations now just suck and can't be honest with each other. My generation, my friends, if I posted a picture of myself, 49 years old, in this condition, shirtless, the brutality that would ensue on Facebook would be tough to watch for a lot of people, I can tell you. And I'm all for it. Which brings me to, by the way, I just want to give a quick nod here and thank you. And I don't get a lot of plaudits from established people, but to be called today publicly by Dave Cullen, my friend Dave,
Mm-hmm.
the greatest and most talented radio partner Jerry Callahan has ever had, and that is a quote by Dave, was incredible. Thank you very much. That means over John Dennis, over Kirk Miniham. That's a high praise. Dave, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I don't usually, I mean, that's saying something, and just thank you. I feel like I should give a speech. I have changed my Twitter bio to include that praise. It's now the beginning line in my Twitter bio. I've gotten rid of my current job that's on there because what are you going to say? But Dave has worked with a lot of famous people, and at RKO, at all sorts of different places. So thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate that. Thank you. Right back at you. Dave is a incredibly sufficiently adept producer. Then that's my return praise to him. So, all right. Do we talk politics, Ukraine? Do we?
I don't know what
Here's
else
the
to
only
say
thing I
about
wanna
it, to
say
be
about-
honest with you. And I don't want to have a show where we force ourselves to say stuff because that's like what's in the news, so we must cover.
So then
Putin's
let me
invading Ukraine.
ask you something. Let me put it to you.
Okay.
Let me interview you on this then.
Okay.
What effect do you think that the left's narrative, and not even just narrative, but core, hardcore, soul deep belief that Putin gave Trump the election because he bought some Facebook ads and that made everybody go nuts and vote for the MAGA guy? What effect do you think that has on how people think about what we're supposed to do with Ukraine and Russia?
Well, it's odd because
They're still saying it, by the way. If you look at social media, all over the place, they're still saying that Putin owned Trump, Putin owned Trump, Putin owned Trump, Putin owned Trump. It's all over the place.
right. I mean, and there's a whole bunch of people who are saying stuff like, I mean, I sent you one this morning that I saw where somebody tweeted, some blue check mark tweeted, you know, I really wonder how Trump would have handled this situation. And like,
Right.
we know how Trump would have handled Putin because we had 4 years of Trump literally being the president of the United
Right.
States while there was Putin. So we don't need to speculate about whether or not he was owned by Putin or what, because Putin wasn't getting all this stuff that he wanted under Trump. He had sanctions on him that Biden lifted. It was like the only presidency where he didn't invade Ukraine, it seems to me. I just don't like, we have the evidence of who was tougher on Putin. So I don't,
But Alice, people,
I don't know
people
what
can't-
kind of like
people can't-
4D chess machination they're imagining was going on here. Like Putin owned Trump, but then like didn't take advantage of the fact that Trump was in his pocket this whole time to do all this stuff
Right.
that he wanted.
You figure-
And then he waited until Biden was president to like make Biden look bad. Like what?
You know
I
what
don't
that's done
get-
to me, Alice? To watch them say this, when they're saying this, well, at least Biden has united everybody, and all the NATO countries are condemning and this, that, To me, what that's saying is that much like Facebook now is a pet cemetery
Right.
where people go talk about, Mr. Boots, who left us after 15 years as the greatest cat in the world,
Mm-hmm.
is that Twitter, the degradation on Twitter has gotten so that it's where you go to have a tantrum, not based on facts.
Well, right. Yeah, I guess so. I guess Twitter is where you just go to vent your feelings about how mean Trump was or whatever. But sorry. But it's interesting and odd to me, like the disconnect about this Putin stuff, because obviously the left thinks, because they associate Trump and Putin together in their heads, that like Putin's bad and Russia's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so like obviously they think Russia invading Ukraine is bad, but then it's hard to see like how do they then square the circle of the fact of like Putin not paying any attention to anything Biden tells him to do and just invading Ukraine, and like what do they want Biden to do about it? Because, Biden went on and on during the campaign about how, like, Putin didn't want him to be president because he would be so tough on him, and he knows what he's doing, unlike Trump that got tricked by all the strongman world leaders, and that's just so clearly not true at all. Like, Biden just got totally pushed around by Putin.
Like, if you're somebody who supports Neville Chamberlain,
Mm-hmm.
and he comes back and he says that we've secured peace in our time, from the Treaty of Versailles, and he takes a victory lap, and you say, see, you see, and then the Germans roll into the Sudetenland and roll into Poland, and he knows he's cooked. Chamberlain knows. Like, what is the emotional need to be a dead ender and say, no, he was right. He was just right. He was right. Because I don't think the 1940s were peace in our time.
No, it seems like they weren't. It doesn't seem like Kamala's sanctions were the strongest deterrent the world had ever seen.
Right.
Like it didn't happen the way that they said it would happen. It was not a historic airlift that happened
Jesus.
in Afghanistan, right? Like it was a disaster and it was a mess. And their Russia policy was a disaster and a mess. And I don't, I don't get how you justify it to other to other people, like, because there's a whole bunch of people on Twitter and I guess in real life, although like I still think it's more prevalent on Twitter, who, like you say, are dead enders, who are just always going to parrot the party line and like say the thing no matter what, even if they know it's stupid, they're just gonna keep saying it. Like, there's always that group of people, right? And then so there's like that group of people on both sides, and then there's people who are sort of in the middle, who truly like don't really know or care either way, like don't have strong feelings about any politics. I tend to think most people in the very middle, not so much that they like don't lean one way or the other, but they just like don't care to know anything about politics. Like, there's a whole bunch of people who just don't, like, it doesn't even like, they haven't heard about Ukraine this week. They don't know about it.
God bless those people. I want to be one of those people.
I know.
That was Tom Shattuck at Sonsie in 1995.
I know. You missed it all. Like,
although I did spend my time hating
the same
Bill Clinton.
people that all the man on the street bits always find. Right. When they go interview people and they're like, "Who's the vice president?" They're like, like, they don't know.
Lucky bastards.
But there's like a whole bunch of people like that. There's a lot of them that are out there, and then there are people who like care and listen and probably like lean one way or the other, but are intellectually honest. And those are the people that you peel off with like this Afghanistan stuff, with this CRT stuff in the schools, with Leah Thomas, the trans swimmer, with like those types of policies. I mean, they're the same type of people that, a lot of them did leave the suburban voters who consider themselves informed. Like, a lot of them left the Republican Party when Trump was there because he offended their sensibilities, and they're educated in this. But they're fairly intellectually honest people, so they can be honest when they see the Afghanistan historic airlift happening, or they can be honest when they see that Putin clearly is not intimidated by anything Biden's doing at all, and they can like honestly assess the situation. I think of it like in this state, right? We had that election with Charlie Baker last time in 2018. When he was reelected, and he had like a 75% approval rating. And there were obviously a bunch of like Republicans who are upset at him for not being right wing enough, because he's not very right wing at all. And then like, there were a bunch of moderate Democrats who recognize him for what he is, which is essentially a moderate Democrat with an R next to his name, and they are honest about it, and they just like him and voted for him. And then there's like still a few, like the Democrats technically ran somebody, Jay Gonzalez, but it was like a nothing candidate. There was nothing behind it. Nobody cared about it. Like, there was no reason to have somebody else besides Charlie Baker in the race, because he's like very broadly popular with the state's moderate Democrat base, right? And
well, yeah, but
so
also
that was like to me the baseline of like everybody who just went out and voted for Jay Gonzalez, even though he had like no reason to even be there, and Charlie Baker is essentially a Democrat, so there's nothing. If you're a Democrat, you have no reason, if you're being honest, not to vote for Charlie Baker.
I assume turnout was low. I don't know, recall, but in Massachusetts, I assume it was low in 2018.
Kinda, but there was.
But Baker had shivved Trump, which certainly helped him. But it's still remarkable to me.
Well, like Jeff Deal was on the ballot that year against Warren and stuff. So I mean, was it against Warren? Yeah, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So. I mean, that stuff, like, it wasn't that low turnout. Like, there was stuff on the ballot, and there were ballot questions, I think, and stuff, too. But the whole, like, there are a bunch of people that are persuadable, right, I guess is my point. But then there is this, like, very vocal minority. Like, I regarded that 2018 gubernatorial election really as, like, a test case for who are the people who are just going to vote Democrat no matter what. Like, the Republican Party ran a Democrat too, and you guys are voting for the other Democrat just because, right?
Who was the crazy guy?
Scott Lively?
Yes. Oh, God, yes. There's 3 reasons why people pick you up in a car. For sex, or because they're alcoholics, or for a third reason. I forgot what it was.
Yeah.
He was a very interesting guy. I'll tell you that.
But yeah, like, so there's just people that are rabid, and a lot of them are on Twitter. So they're just always gonna, they're gonna go out there and tell you that Charlie Baker is some crazy right-wing nut job because that's like what the Democratic Party said this week. And they're gonna go out and tell you that Joe Biden's doing an awesome job in Afghanistan, and isn't it great? And they're gonna go out and tell you that that Biden is super tough on Putin and that somehow this is Trump's fault and all those things. They're going to keep saying that stuff, even though it's like demonstrably false and everybody around them is embarrassed for them.
It's funny. Can I change the subject?
Mm-hmm.
Reuters reports 46 minutes ago.
Okay.
1,200-year-old remains of sacrificed adults, kids unearthed in Peru.
Yeah. Are you surprised by that? That the peaceful native civilizations were sacrificing humans?
Well, that's my point.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting to see a news story where white supremacists like you and I aren't in trouble?
I'm sure they can find a way.
1,200 years ago, Alice, I'm pretty sure there were no Europeans in Peru. 1,200 years ago. I think this is showing Peru's supremacy.
Well, they'll just argue that it's good. I've seen liberals on Twitter argue that too.
That what's
different cultures had a very different understanding.
They should get to do genocide too.
Different cultures had a very different understanding of human sacrifice. It was considered a service that you could do to your tribe to appease the gods. It was considered an honor to be human sacrificed. It was a very different culture. We have no right to judge them. Look at the things we do. Right? That's the argument. Yeah, the Aztecs had they had, or we're supposed to call them now the Mexica, I think, not the Aztecs. But
when the F did that happen?
I don't know, recently.
You can't call them the Aztecs anymore.
I think they're called the Mexica now.
No, they're not called the effing Mexica. They're called the Aztecs.
Okay.
Aztec is a cool name. They did the first brain surgeries?
Probably on
Alice?
sacrifice.
Alice?
They built
Don't show your
towers
stripes.
of skulls of human
Don't
sacrifice
show your stripes,
victims.
Alice.
The other native groups that they subjugated in Central America were all thrilled and helped the colonizers to try and get rid of them because they were so oppressive and terrible. Yeah, human beings are not very kind to each other, it turns out. Did you see that movie, the Mel Gibson movie, Apocalypto, where it's
No.
it's the guy is going to be human sacrificed by some kind of South or Central American civilization, and he runs away and tries to get away. You wouldn't like the movie, trust me. There's no talking, and it's just him running away in the jungle and stuff, and it's violent.
You won't be surprised to know, Alice,
What?
that John Featherston
I love John Featherston.
made a note that Dave Cullen had said I was the greatest person to ever work, really to ever be in radio.
Right.
And there are many people who disagree. Alice, you won't be surprised to know. But a lot of these people I agree with. Jay Severin should be on the list. I like that. Not that he should be above me, but he should be on the list somewhere. David Brundoy, Howie Carr. I also, another thing I like is that a lot of the people who took me seriously when I said I did everything right when I get COVID, etc., have now made the determination, Alice, that I'm a parody account. Yep, parody
When did
account.
they decide that you're a parody account? I can't.
I'm not a parody account. Jesus.
You have a blue check mark. How
Yeah,
can
I'm
you
very
be a
important.
parody account?
I'm very important. Oh, my goodness.
Oh.
Okay.
Remember I told you a while ago that that people on Twitter were trying to make it into a thing that the truckers are Nazis because honk honk stands for HH.
Yes.
Stands. So now that's that philosophy is going mainstream. If you check what I just sent you, by the way.
Oh, hold on. Let me check.
So did you know? So as I predicted, the things that crazy people said on Twitter became
How
a
many
reality.
guns need to be seized? How much vitriol do
This
we
is in
have
the
to see
Canadian
of
Parliament,
Hong Kong,
by the way.
which is an acronym for Hail Hitler? Do we need to see by these protesters on social media? How many guns?
I like that she's scared of vitriol. There's vitriol happening. Do you know that?
How many times do you need to see the words honk honk, which means Heil Hitler? She just says unqualified with no, like, that's all it takes. That's all it takes is some people on the internet making a joke that something means Heil Hitler, and all of a sudden the entire left believes it. It's the same as the thing with like the circle game, the OK sign thing.
Oh,
Do
yeah,
you remember
God,
they
of
made
course.
that a thing?
In a White House
It
tour,
means-
a kid did the okay thing.
It means white power. I hope you know. Like they just made it's just a joke. Like it doesn't
Of
mean
course, it's got to
white
be the
power.
worst thing in the world. Yes, you know it's white supremacy.
And do you remember
By the way-
then they had like pictures of kids at basketball games going like
Right.
this at basketball games, and it was they're making the white power sign. See,
By the way, if you are in Montana, an actual white supremacist, skinhead, you have all the books, you believe in you can show genetic evidence that you're better, etc., and have everything. Someday you want to start the race war so that you can ascend, etc. Talk about appropriation. It's like they have watered down.
I think they like it because I think they think that it means that they've gone mainstream and like everybody else really like. I think they believe their own press. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, but
remember
Alice,
the white
but
supremacists?
now
all, like,
now they're thrown in with Candace Owens. Candace Owens is a white supremacist.
They'd probably take Candace Owens. They're that probably desperate for membership, honestly.
A
They're
multicultural white supremacy
They
group.
probably are. They remember they were so happy. Like Richard Spencer was getting on TV all the time in 2016 with the Trump campaign because they were the mainstream media was happy to play them because they were like, yeah, we support Trump. We're white supremacists. And so like CNN was seeking out anybody who said they
Of
were
course.
a white supremacist and supported Trump. They, when Richard Spencer felt betrayed by Trump and like he didn't do any of the white supremacist things he hoped he would and that he was voting for Biden this time, CNN didn't make that into the news. But, when the media is trying to make it seem like white supremacists are mainstream, the white supremacists like that because they think that it means that they're like becoming mainstream. But
Yeah,
they're
I
just
think- I
not.
think
They're
that- I
still
think
just
that
losers.
mainstreaming of white supremacists could be bad for them. Because I do think there are a lot of ne'er-do-wells and a lot of runts of the litter who gravitate toward because it's so gross, because it's so not accepted by polite
Well,
company.
right. And if you had any ethics as like a journalist or anybody else, you wouldn't be purposely trying to amplify the voices of obviously disturbed, screwed up people running around claiming to be white supremacists and making
But
them
that's Jeff
think
Zucker
that
who greenlit that.
So I guess to follow up on that, the president said before he got here that Putin knows if I am president of the United States, his days of tyranny and trying to intimidate the United States and those in Eastern Europe are over. It's 2.5 years later. He is intimidating the United States and those in Eastern Europe. What happened?
I'd hardly put it that way. I would look at it actually from the prism of the United States and President Biden has rallied the world, rallied Europe to stand up against the efforts and the actions of President Putin. And we've laid out very clearly exactly.
$4 gas, $5 gas, however how you guys think it's going to go, something like that is not intimidating.
You asked me if we were intimidated by the President Putin, and I think the evidence of that doesn't exist.
So I guess to follow
Well, we'll see.
yeah, he's certainly not intimidated by you.
So along those lines, here's John Bolton on with Andrea Mitchell. Listen to her. Just the consternation. What? What are you talking about? The consternation.
Well, I think
only one
Putin
speech,
is
unfortunately.
undoubtedly waiting for a second Trump term, but he's getting effectively almost what he would have expected then. This is going to be a victory for Russia.
You think that what the Biden administration is doing, rallying the NATO allies,
It has failed.
Ambassador.
The president says it is.
But he's rallied the NATO allies. They're all getting along. They're one. What? Can you imagine that? No, he's rallied them. They're rallied now. They're together with one voice. We stand with Ukraine. There's hashtags now.
They probably also support trans rights and, diversity and like that pregnant people should be allowed to fly bombers and everything else, right? Like, so that's great. And I think Putin should be very scared of that level of unity and diversity and forward-thinking.
Exactly.
Our
We're gonna woke him to death. We'll see how that works out.
As always, you can find us on Twitter if you want to tell Tom other people who should be on the list somewhere below him for top radio and podcast hosts of all time. You can let us know that there. That is at Burn Barrel Pod on Twitter or at Tom Shattuck. You can also find us at facebook.com/Burn Barrel Podcast or burnbarrelpodcast.com. You can write your emails to burnbarrelpodcast@gmail.com.